here in the upstate for making us feel so welcome. I'm pleased to say tonight that we have several individuals here from the Legislative Black Caucus, but no, and we have former members of the caucus here as well. But I'd like to take a particular point of personal privilege to thank Reverend Dr. Snoddy, who is the pastor of this great historic church. Let's give him a round of applause. I understand we are also privileged to have with us the mayor of the great city of Spartanburg, Mayor White. Councilman Brown. And there are others here as well. In fact, could we have our elected officials please just stand where you are and be recognized? Let's give them all a round of applause. I'm going to move out of the way, but before I do, because we have some important business to discuss. The South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus is a 501c4. Let me make that clear. We are here tonight because we want, and our mission is to be an advocate for the people of the citizens of the state of South Carolina. To be a voice for those who cannot advocate or are in a position to be a voice for themselves. We stand behind to try to get input from the populace, the people, the underserved, and we also stand to advocate for those positions in the South Carolina General Assembly to make South Carolinians proud to be a part of this whole issue called public service. But we have some individuals here tonight because there's no I in team. And I'd like to recognize some of those individuals that are here tonight who make the Legislative Black Caucus what it is. And I'm going to ask them to stand and be recognized. The key individuals that were involved in terms of putting this together and making it happen, some of whom cannot be here tonight for extenuating circumstances. But I'd like to ask my sweet mate, my desk mate, and my confidant, the distinguished representative from Spartanburg, Representative Rosalind Myers. Please stand and be recognized. Representative Ivory Thigpen. We also have an individual that has gone a long way down the road with me. We came up through the ranks together. Representative Terry Alexander. The only serving standing chair of a legislative standing committee in the General Assembly of the state of South Carolina and former chair of the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus, the Honorable Leon Howard. And I have two former colleagues that are in the audience that I would like to recognize tonight. from both of whom represented Spartanburg in the General Assembly, Representative Brenda Lee, former Representative Brenda Lee. Of course, Leon is always drawing the attention in the back. These people were in person. Bad Leon. You okay? My grandchildren and children call him Uncle Leon. That's how close we are. Give him another round. And the other former representative from Spartanburg, Representative Harold Mitchell. I'm surveying the room because I know some other individuals are supposed to be on the way. Representative, there he is, out looking for you. From the great state of Charleston, Representative Wendell Gilliard. Now, Senator Carl Allen wanted to be here tonight. He's one of the panelists. Hopefully he will stick his head in. But he is right now conducting very important business of the state of South Carolina as the Senate is now dealing with the appropriations bill. Representative Leola Robinson Simpson is dealing with a personal loss in terms of she lost her mother. And Representative Chandra Dillard, who also is from the upstate, could not be here tonight, but worked very hard in terms of putting this together. Let's give them a round of applause. And if I would ask you to simply bow your heads in a moment of silence in remembrance of Representative Leola Robinson Simpson's mother and their family as they go through this difficult time. Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, they've organized a great program tonight, and for that purpose, and I'm going to ask that the person who will be emceeing this program tonight, please step forward. Again, she's my desk mate, my suite mate, and she's going to introduce our panelists as well for this evening. In which we have some very distinguished panelists, so I'm not going to steal all the thunder. That's why I'm not going to introduce the panelists. But I'm going to ask her to step forward. Let's give her a warm round of applause. She's doing an outstanding job in the General Assembly for you. Representative Rosalind Myers Henderson. Please come out, Ross.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. I'm so happy to see all of you here, and I know that we need to get started with our program, and you all are waiting to hear from Senator Sanders as well as the many fine panelists that we have gotten to come and speak with you today on the issues that we have with the education and the criminal justice reform. At this time, I'm going to just acknowledge the other elected officials that we have here. If I do not call your name, please understand that I did not see you. If you stand up, I'll recognize you. We have Mayor Pro Tem Alan Jenkins, who is here for Mayor White. Please stand. We have City Council Member Ruth Littlejohn. She's here. And we also have her husband, Horace Littlejohn, who's with the Spartanburg Water Commission. And we have former City Council Member, Honorable Robert Reeder. Did I miss anyone? If you would, please stand. Okay, all right. Thank you. All right, now we're going to have a welcome from Mayor Pro Tem Alan Jenkins.
Thank you, Representative Henderson-Myers. Thank you all for letting me take a couple of moments. On behalf of our mayor, our city council, and the great people of Spartanburg, I welcome you all to this upstate town hall meeting. I want to thank the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus, Mount Moriah Baptist Church, and all of the upstate leaders and leaders from across our state who have gathered for these important discussions tonight. I especially want to thank Representative Rosalind Henderson-Myers, the host for tonight's event, for her vision and her hard work. I also want to thank Senator Bernie Sanders for taking the time to visit Spartanburg and hear about the unique challenges facing our community. The city of Spartanburg welcomes you, sir. As I welcome you, I would be remiss if I did not take a couple of moments to talk about the fact that tonight I welcome you all to a city that stands at a crossroads. Spartanburg spends a lot of time celebrating its achievements, the explosive growth of our downtown businesses, the reopening of the historic Montgomery building, a red-hot real estate market, and the construction of a set of beautiful new schools, including the spectacular new Spartanburg High School being built on East Main Street. Thank you, Dr. Russell Booker, for your leadership, and to your school board for their vision. We have a lot to celebrate, but we also face many challenges. Nearly a quarter of our city's residents live in poverty. That's over 10,000 people. 48% of our city's population is black, and it's not news to anyone here that poverty hits our black population the hardest. Generational poverty is the greatest challenge Spartanburg faces today, and at the heart of that is a racial inequity that we must fight at every opportunity and with every tool at our disposal. I am overjoyed to live in a city of people who are working hard and working together to move the needle. Our mayor and council are dedicated to this proposition. Our city government and its phenomenal staff are focused on this fight, and we are not alone. We have more community partners and leaders than I can mention in my brief time here, but collectively their work is already transforming our city. It will take everyone working together and willing to try new ways of addressing age-old problems. We don't have all the answers here in Spartanburg, but we want them, and we don't care where they come from. Anyone can change our city if they come to the table ready to talk and willing to roll up their sleeves and get to work. I look out at this room and I see a lot of people who are ready to do just that. And I thank you, and on behalf of our great city, I welcome you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have a welcome from the county with County Councilman Michael Brown.
August 28th, 1963. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Those words that were uttered from the lips of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King on what has now been described and known as the famous March on Washington, encapsulated in the I Have a Dream. I have a dream. Also in that speech, Dr. King relayed the words of the Founding Fathers. And he also said that there was a check that was written, a promissory note that indeed came back with insufficient funds listed upon it. A life's work that began on that day. And as I understand it, if you're going to be able to be the President of the United States, you have to be able to march with kings. Well, As I felt the burn in 2016, I came to know that United States Senator Bernie Sanders indeed did march on that day in Washington. You know, I was contacted by another campaign just last week, and they were asking me what type of message, which presidential candidates do, what kind of message would resonate within the community. And I said, well, you know all the great things about Spartanburg County, being one of the leaders in the industrial age of modern times, as we are at the epicenter of the automotive industry. You know about the challenges that we often discuss about tariffs, exports, imports, and want to remain on the top of the burgeoning list of the great economic opportunities that we have here. You know about the work that's being done with the General Assembly in terms of trying to make sure that people have an opportunity to be gainfully employed, in spite of some of the things that may have happened in their past. You also know about the work that's being done here locally to ensure that at some point we can tackle this mass incarceration system. Spartanburg, for the many of you that don't know, it is still the #1 county in this state of sending people to the Department of Corrections. And so when I was asked in terms of what type of things should a candidate address, in particular as it relates to those things that are important to us, I said, well, you have to have the audacity, and this is coming from a younger African-American male, you have to have the audacity that an older white man is willing to say. Something many candidates, whether you're black or white, will not. I said, so you need to look at the message that's being put together, and I know it's going to keep the conversation current, and it's going to provide a roadmap. Senator Bernie Sanders is providing that roadmap in terms of the current conversation. So thank you, sir. So with that, I know we're not here to do any kind of endorsements, but with that being said, I just want to say thank you, sir. Keep your conversation going. Remain unapologetic of what you have to say, because your message is resonating in our community and throughout this land. We welcome you here. We're so very thankful for the members that have joined us, the elected officials that represent our great state at this grand historic time. From the sister from Cleveland, you know, I went to graduate school at the Ohio State, so you know I know you. We're so very appreciative that you're here. Welcome to you all in one of the greatest counties in this country, Spartanburg County. Thank you for being here. Pay attention, and hey, let the senator know if you are indeed feeling the burn. Thank you.
All right, next we have up Senator Nina Turner. Senator Turner is an American politician from Ohio, a member of the Democratic Party. She was a Cleveland City Council member from 2006 to 2008, and Ohio State Senator from 2008 until 2014. She later was a surrogate for Bernie Sanders in his 2016 presidential campaign. I bring you Senator Nina Turner.
Wow. I want to thank Representative Myers for that wonderful introduction, to Chairman Govan, to the pastor of this church, Mount Moriah, and all of the parishioners here. Thank you so much for opening these doors, to the Black Caucus for holding this forum, to all of my sisters and brothers in the elected ministry, to Councilman Brown. Now you know I'm from Cleveland, okay? We'll have that debate about the Ohio State at another time. But I count it all joy to be in the house of the Lord. Pastor, I am a preacher's kid. And my siblings and I went to church 8 days a week. So I'm feeling mighty fine right here, Representative Alexander. I'm feeling real comfortable. But I want to say to you that it is indeed an honor to serve as one of the 4 national co-chairs for Senator Bernie Sanders' campaign. We also have Brother Ro Khanna, Congressman from California, Sister Carmen Cruz from San Juan, Puerto Rico, and the humanitarian chief ice cream maker himself, Ben Cohen from Ben & Jerry's, part of our team, and we are proud. Booker T. Washington once said that there are 2 ways of exerting one's strength. One is by pushing down, and the other is by pulling up. What we have in Senator Bernie Sanders is a champion who understands how to use the cachet, the people's power that he has been given to pull up and not to push down. What we have in Senator Bernie Sanders is a visionary, a champion that does not wait to find out what the polls have to say, but one who is willing to stand up for what is right, for what is just, and for what is good, whether it's popular or not. Reverend, I submit to you that Senator Bernie Sanders understands the creeds in the Christian Bible that talks about he or she who is greatest among you shall be the servant. He has used the power, the people's power, to stand up for Medicare for all when it wasn't popular. He sets the pace. He's had the courage and the vision to say to Jeff Bezos, the wealthiest man on the face of the earth, that you should and will pay your employees $15 an hour. He has the courage, the conviction, and the vision to not just talk about it, but to be about it. To be on the picket line with workers from Verizon to Marriott. To stand up to say to Disney that this is not necessarily the happiest place on earth and that Daffy and Goofy wouldn't like it because you're not paying your employees a living wage. He has the vision and the courage to know from a lived experience, Representative Gilliard, being a first-generation college graduate, to have a father come to this country at the age of 17 years old from Poland to escape the Holocaust, to having a mother who left this earth far too young. From a lived experience, he understands that no one chooses to live in poverty, that everybody doesn't run this race at the same pace. And what people are asking for is the opportunity to live their measure of a good life. They're not asking for a handout, they're asking for a hand up. He understands. And he has the courage and the conviction. In the words of Congresswoman Barbara Jordan, when she said these words, what the people want is very simple. They want an America as good as its promise. It is not too much to ask for clean water, clean air, clean food, good jobs, and opportunities. And Senator Sanders stands up for that. We got the receipts. We have the receipts for his service. And so I bring to you a man who has the courage and the conviction and the vision and the faith to understand that he cannot do this alone. And when he says that this is not me, this is about us, he means it. When he says the words, when we get to the White House, he means it. And what you can take all the way to any bank in this country and throughout this world is that Senator Sanders will never sell you out for any special interest. That you are his special interest. The everyday people of this country. So sisters and brothers, can you do something for a sister as the senator comes? If you can raise one hand, because we do believe in call and response in the black church. Is that all right, Reverend? If you can raise one hand for yourself and one hand for somebody else. And to know that with these hands, we will overcome. That with these hands, we will have Medicare for all. With these hands, we will have college for all. With these hands, we will have a vision and a system in this country that answers for the 99%. And with these hands, we will elect Senator Bernie Sanders, the next president of the United States of America.
Thank you all very much. I love Senator Nina Turner, but it is always hard to follow that woman. She makes my life miserable in that respect. I want to thank the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus for not only holding this meeting, but for inviting me to be with you. I want to thank the Reverend Dr. Benjamin Snoddy for hosting this event in this beautiful, beautiful church. And I want to thank Caucus Chair Jerry Govan, Representative Rosalind Henderson Myers, Representative Chandra Dillard, Representative Ann Parks, Representative Leola Robinson Simpson, and Mr. Devon Owens for all of their work in making this event possible. Thank you all very much. As you have already heard this evening, there are enormous issues facing this country. We're talking about a grotesque level of income and wealth inequality, where a handful of families literally own more wealth than the bottom half of America. We're talking about half of this people in this country working at less than a livable wage and living paycheck to paycheck. We're talking about the United States of America, our great country, being the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a right. We're talking about a crumbling infrastructure. So there are a lot of issues out there. But tonight, the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus has chosen, appropriately enough, to focus on two issues of enormous consequence, which are intricately linked, and that is education and criminal justice. A nation and a community which provides quality education for its children, that makes certain there are good jobs available to those young people when they leave school, is a nation and a community which will have a lower rate of crime, where residents will be safer, where human lives are not destroyed because people are rotting away their lives in prisons, and at the same time is a nation and community which will save enormous sums of money by avoiding mass incarceration. But having said that, let us be clear that in South Carolina, in Vermont, and virtually every state in our country, we are failing to provide those jobs and that education to our young people. And the result, shamefully, is that today in America, we have more people behind bars than any other major country on earth. And I want you all to think about the fact that China is a communist authoritarian country 4 times our size. in population, and yet we have more people in jail, over 2 million people, than China has. Further, let us not forget for a moment that we now spend some $80 billion a year at the local, state, and federal level to lock up fellow Americans who are disproportionately African American, Latino, and Native American. Meanwhile, study after study after study shows that if we invest in our children, if we invest in high-quality child care and pre-K education, if we have a strong K through 12 educational system, if we make sure that all of our young people, regardless of the income of their family, have a right to a higher education. If we don't allow kids to fall through the cracks by paying special attention to students from troubled families, if we do all of that, the research is very clear. Our children do better. They graduate from high school at far higher rates. They are more likely to get a higher education or technical training after high school. They are more likely to become productive, tax-paying members of society. And with regard to the issues that we're discussing tonight, when you invest in kids and you make sure they have jobs and education, they are much less likely to end up in the criminal justice system. The truth is that you do not need a PhD in criminology to figure that one out. It's just common sense. Young people who have a poor education, who lack job skills, who hang out on street corners and have no hope for the future are more likely to engage in destructive and self-destructive activities. As the great abolitionist Frederick Douglass stated, and I quote, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." The current situation of not providing the quality education or the job opportunities for our young people that exist in every state in this country, but it is especially true in minority communities where public schools are underfunded and youth unemployment is particularly high. So let me be as straightforward as I can be. In my view, it makes a lot more sense for us to invest in our young people in jobs and education rather than in jails and incarceration. I would much rather prevent young people from engaging in criminal activity than spend a fortune locking them up. Here in South Carolina, you spend about over $21,700 a year keeping a prisoner behind bars, but you spend $11,500 to keep a student in school. Frankly, I think we should spend money keeping kids in school, not in prison. And let us not forget something that we often do forget, is that when we lock somebody up, put them away for 3 years, 5 years, 20 years, it is not only that individual who is suffering. It is his wife, it is his kids, it is his overall family. So what does that mean in practical terms? What should we be doing to significantly reduce the rate of incarceration in this country? It means that we must have the courage in the wealthiest country in the history of the world to acknowledge that our child care and pre-K systems are almost totally dysfunctional. Now, if you are a worker, you're a family, somebody's out there working making 10, 12 bucks an hour, how do you pay $10,000 or $15,000 a year for child care? Meanwhile, the child care workers themselves, in most cases, are working for poverty wages without decent benefits. Now, last year I worked hard, successfully, to help double the federal child care development block grant program. We increased it by several $billion, but we understand that we are just denting the surface. So here you have all child psychologists. What do they tell us? They tell us that 0 through 4 are the most important years of human development, both intellectually and emotionally. Our job, and we should not be embarrassed or hesitant about saying it, is that we must do what many other countries are doing and have universal, affordable pre-K education for every family in this country. When children enter kindergarten or the first grade, they should be well prepared intellectually and emotionally. They should not be 2 years behind before they begin their education. Further, when we talk about education, we must make it clear to every parent in this state and in my state and in every state that if their child studies hard and does well in school, regardless of the income of that family, that young person will be able to get a college education or the technical training that he or she needs to succeed in life. And that is why, with some success, as I mentioned earlier, we are working hard to make public colleges and universities tuition-free, to substantially increase funding for HBCUs, and to significantly reduce the student debt that so many young people are carrying. And the issue of student debt is an issue for 40 million Americans, but the truth is, it is an even greater burden for young African Americans. Now, why is that important? Why do I begin by telling you that we should make public colleges and universities tuition-free? And I'll tell you why. Because all over this country, in my state and in your state, there are low-income kids in the 5th grade and the 6th grade who have grown up in poverty, whose parents may have dropped out of school. Everybody that they knew dropped out of school. And those kids in the 5th grade or the 6th grade already know, consciously or subconsciously, that they are never going to make it to the middle class. They know that. So when we tell those parents and we tell those kids, and teachers get the word out, young man, young woman, if you work hard, it doesn't matter what the income of your family is, you are going to get a higher education and you will make it to the middle class. That's a big deal. And people say, you know, Bernie, you want to make public colleges and universities tuition free, you want to reduce student debt, that's expensive. Well, it is expensive, but you know what? It is not more expensive than Trump and his friends giving over $1 trillion in tax breaks to the 1% and large profitable corporations. But obviously, it is not only having a quality, affordable child care system and making public colleges and universities tuition free. We must significantly, and I know this state, and I know that many of the members of the legislature probably deal with this issue every single day, and that is to improve the quality of education from K to 12. And what does that mean? What do we mean by improving education? Most importantly, not a radical idea, it means making clear that we respect education and educators. Think about it for a moment. Think about the future of this country and understand that here in South Carolina, I was just in Chicago last week, and many other communities around this country, we do not have enough teachers. We need a radical cultural shift in this country which makes it clear that educators must be honored, they must be well respected, and they must be well paid. We should not be seeing, as we are today, a decline in young people going into teaching. We should be seeing and demanding an increase. We should be attracting the best and the brightest into the enormously important teaching profession. And I would say that, frankly, if we live in a nation where we can provide a $300 million contract to a baseball player, we can provide teachers with a salary worthy of that important profession. And now let me say a few words about the other issue that is going to be discussed today, and that is the need for real, fundamental criminal justice reform. And I'll just touch on give you an overview of some of the issues that I'm concerned about. First, it goes without saying that all Americans, whether they are black or white or Latino or Native American, Asian American, or whatever, must be treated equally under the law. Equal justice under the law is what this country is supposed to be about, and together we will bring that about. African Americans should not be stopped more frequently than whites for traffic violations. African Americans should not be arrested more frequently than whites for possession of marijuana. African Americans should not receive harsher punishment than whites for committing the same crimes. Further, we need a criminal justice system which is not only a non-racist system, but which treats all people, rich and poor, equally. And I think one of the scandals of the last decade is the understanding that over a 10-year period, millions of young people, black and white and Latino, receive criminal records for possessing marijuana. Yet, the crooks on Wall Street who destroyed this economy 10 years ago, not one of them served a day in jail. Something wrong with that system. And when we talk about real criminal justice reform, of course, we're talking about police department reform. We're talking about creating police departments all over this country whose membership reflect the demographics of the community and do not look like invading armies. We're talking about providing the training that police officers all over this country. And let me say this, as someone who is a mayor and worked with police officers, you got the vast majority of police officers who work hard and do their best to do a difficult job. But they need the training, for example, to deal with mental disturbances, with crowd control. And we need a criminal justice system which understands that the use of lethal force should always be the last option, not the first. Criminal justice reform means addressing the very high rate of recidivism. It is a no-brainer to understand that if somebody leaves prison tomorrow without an education, without job training, without a home, it is altogether likely that that person will fall into the same environment that he was in, which got him in prison, and that he's going to return again. In 2015, 22% of prisoners released here in South Carolina returned to incarceration within 3 years or less. Clearly, we can do better than that. So let me just conclude by thanking the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus for the great work that they are doing on all of these issues. I know how hard it is. But I think a new day is coming. A new day is coming. And I think if more and more Americans are understanding that if we don't allow Trump and his friends to divide us up based on the color of our skin or where we were born, or our religion, or our sexual orientation, if we stand together, as Dr. King reminded us, if we stand together and keep our eyes on the prize, we can create a nation which intelligently and effectively addresses these issues and many more. Thank you all very much. I'm happy to if you want.
Senator Sanders, everyone. So happy to have Senator Sanders to come here for Spartanburg, the very first time he's been here. And you know, he answered the call that we put out for presidential candidates to come, and he took the guts, he had the guts to come to Spartanburg, because Spartanburg is a city on the move, and I'm glad that he recognized that. Senator Sanders is on a tight schedule and has to leave in a few minutes, but before he does, he's going to take a few questions from the audience. So if any of you have any questions, I'm going to give the mic back to Senator Sanders.
Okay. Gentleman right here. Yeah.
Good evening. How's it going?
Good.
Good evening to everybody that came out from the community. My name is Antonio Tanner. I'm the Vice President for the NAACP chapter at Upstate. And my question is, how would you stop the pipeline from school to prison? What is your idea?
I'll tell you. A number of years ago, I was in southern Vermont, and I was in a high school, low-income community. And the principal there said something to me that I've never forgotten. She said, Bernie, we are not going to allow kids to drop out of school. We love them too much. And she hired mentors. She paid special attention to kids who come from troubled families. So, you know, kids sometimes when they're young, they get into an argument with their girlfriend, with their boyfriend, there's a family crisis, and they say, to heck with it, I'm quitting, I'm out of here. She literally would not allow them to do that because she loved them and she knew the long-term impacts of dropping out of school. So it is really not that difficult. If we love our kids, if we do not allow them to fall through the cracks, if we find it unacceptable that they're hanging out on a street corner without any money, without any jobs, without any education, without any prospects, if we feel that in our hearts, if we bring those kids into the community and give them the job training that they deserve in community after community around this country, the unemployment rate for young people, especially young minority kids, is much, much too high. So one of the things that we are proposing and will fight for is a guaranteed federal job program. All right? Okay, maybe last question. I do have to go. Yeah, sir. Yeah.
Brother Sanders, what I would like to know is, when you become president, what will you do to stop, like a convicted felon shouldn't be a life sentence? You know, if you could do 5 years in office, but it seemed to carry us all our life.
Good. Look, thank you for that excellent question. And let me just say another word on that issue, which I've gotten criticized for. Some of you may know that in states around this country, and I honestly don't know the situation here in South Carolina, but if you are a felon, you served your time, you got out of jail, you can't vote. I think that that is dead wrong. All right? I think that if you pay your price to society, you got the right to vote. And I'll tell you something else. This will surprise many people, and I've been criticized for saying this, but I'll say, do you know that in the state of Vermont, from the very beginning of my state's history, even people who are in jail have the right to vote, and I think that makes sense. So look, the job of good criminal justice is to say that if somebody commits a crime, they pay the price, they go to jail. But the job primarily is to make sure that we rehabilitate those people, we give them the education, the counseling, the job training that they need to do well outside, in the outside world, all right, to return to society. So I think we do have to take a hard look at a criminal justice system which in many ways is simply based on punishment. On punishment. You did something wrong, I'm going to punish you. Well, yeah, you're going to go to jail, you're going to pay a price, but at the end of the day, what we want is rehabilitation. We want people to become whole emotionally, intellectually. We want them out, back in the community, and make them productive citizens of our society. We can do that. Thank you all very much.
Thank you again, Senator Sanders, for all of his wonderful remarks and for galvanizing our community so that we can be empowered to take care of the problems that we have in our community. We're going to now enter into the part of our program with our panels. The first panel will be our Criminal Justice Reform panel. Our panelists will be Representative Ivory Thigpen, Richland County District 79, Mr. Tony Liebert, 7th Circuit Assistant Solicitor, and Dr. Samantha Hapburn, USC Upstate Criminal Justice Department Chair. We are going to allow our panelists each some time to talk about what they see the issues are and the problems here that affect us both in the state as well as locally. And then afterwards, after all of the panelists have finished speaking, they will be taking questions from the audience. First, we'll have Representative Ivory Thigpen.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Ivory Thigpen. I am South Carolina House Representative for District 79, which is Richland County. It is part of Northeast Columbia, a little bit of Blythewood, South Carolina, and a little bit of Elgin, South Carolina. I think Senator Sanders addressed a lot of what I wanted to say when it comes to criminal justice reform. I think the first thing that we have to talk about is in the 19th century, why prisons came about. And if we understand that prison was a humanitarian advancement from what was currently happening when people committed crimes, that they were being beaten, they were being tortured, some were even being put to death over what seemed to be small and oftentimes not even violent crimes. As there was a renaissance and awakening and an enlightenment from the individuals and humanity and society as a whole, prison systems came about as a way to treat people who had committed crimes in a more humane way, as well as rehabilitate them so that they can enter back into community and be productive citizens. I don't know if we could claim that the prison systems now do that, beginning with how we treat those who have been incarcerated, as well as how we prepare them for their reintroduction back into society. These same people that are taken out of communities, taken from homes, taken from families, these persons will have to enter back into those same communities. Many cases, particularly for nonviolent crimes, you have individuals who are not hardened criminals who go really to prison and become worse persons and harder criminals, only to be reintroduced back to that same community, not for the better, but oftentimes in a worse state and situation. You can't talk about incarceration without talking about education, but it's not just education, it's housing, it's health care, it's jobs. If someone is sick and cannot pay their bills, if someone does not have a roof over their head, if someone cannot be gainfully employed, if someone does not have the training or the educational background to provide for their family, that person becomes desperate. Not only do they not thrive, they get into survival mode. And the difference between really living and surviving, living means that you do what you can to be at your best. Surviving means even if I have to do the worst thing to you, I will do that to you because I am that desperate. So I think particularly in South Carolina, when we talk about nearly 19,000 inmates in 21 prisons, that we talk about something that has been underfunded for decades. And I know even though we have put money towards it in the years past, I'll tell you a quick story and I'll pass the mic on. I try to work out as often as I can, because sitting at the State House, all the food they feed us, you grow, and it's not vertically. And so as I try to make my way to the gym every morning, I remember a vivid conversation I had with a gentleman whose door I knocked on when I was campaigning. And he said, "I'll vote for you on one condition, and that is if you fight to raise the pay for our workers in the prison system." And I told him I would. I saw that same person some years later in the gym, his eyes bloodshot red, and he told me that he was living a nightmare. He said that they were underpaid, they were understaffed, the situation was very dangerous. Our system and our jails are antiquated. They have to unlock cells with keys. There's no way for them to respond to an emergency because not only understaffed, but if you had to literally, I think the director of the South Carolina prison system said that they spend as much as sometimes 80% of their work shift locking and unlocking doors. So we see and we saw with the prison riot at the Lee Correctional Facility last year when 7 persons died, and the pending lawsuits that were filed because of that, that really it is an unsafe environment for not only the officers that guard the prison, but also for the inmates, as well as it is a liability for taxpayers. So we really passed the point of urgency. We cannot afford, and I think that's the right word, afford. We cannot afford to continue to underfund that system, as well as not provide the necessary resources that prevent recidivism.
Can I stand? Hello, everyone. I'm Tony Liebert. I'll take a 30-second commentary. I'm the first member of my family to go to college. My mother had 3 rules. You're going to church, you're going to college, and you can't ever have alcohol. She was raised by drunks that owned a bar. I had no choice, and I went for 7 years and became a lawyer. My dad was a high school dropout. And there's many victims when someone goes to jail. I'm a prosecuting attorney. I hope you don't boo me off the stage. But my job is to protect society, but there's a lot of victims. When my nephew, who's named after me, went to prison for armed robbery, my grandfather, who I'm named after, who went to the 5th grade and never had a driver's license, stayed in his bedroom for 3 weeks, and it killed him. His baby was in prison, and he did 6 years. He raised that boy. That was his grandson. So we understand that. Okay, my job, or my topic tonight is expungements. If you have a record, a lot of things can be expunged. And the definition of an expungement is wherein an arrest or a conviction is erased in the eyes of the law. Erased in the eyes of the law. And the main thing I would tell you, so if you remember anything that's been dismissed, get it off of there. Because when an employer sees that, they may use it against you. And a lot of times there's more charges that are dismissed than there's convictions. And the rap sheet will say arrest charge, and then it'll say court charge, and a lot of times it says after court charge, no pros. What in the world does that mean? Well, that's a Latin phrase that means to remember no more under the law. Well, get it off of there. And let's say that every charge is dismissed. I get charged with 5 forgeries. Didn't have enough money in law school. I took my mama's checkbook and I wrote 5 checks, and she said, "That's it, son, I told you. Calling the police." But then she dismissed them because I talked her out of it. Well, I got to get that off of there. That doesn't automatically come off of there. And it's free. See, in South Carolina, you got to do the work. You got to go get the arrest warrant with the convictions on it. But it's free. Get it off of there. Well, let's say I did 15 checks. And she said, well, just prosecute him on one, Mr. Prosecutor. And the prosecutor says, all right, yours, Mama. So 14 are dismissed. Can I get those 14 off there? Yes. Now I have to pay the fee, one fee. I don't have to pay 14 fees if I'm arrested on the same day and I get them dismissed on the same day. Well, there's 14 charges, and a lot of times we'll see charges that are over, multiple charges. You can have 2 and 3 pages, because I have to tell the court when someone pleads guilty or is found guilty what your record is. And sometimes it's this much of convictions, and it's page after page after page. So get it off of there. I have the applications in the back. I have the worksheet in the back. Those are free. I like things that are free. If you're like, I like coupons, okay? It's free. Then you send it to our office. Cindy Cassidy is the coordinator over at pretrial diversion, and then she will find out in meetings with SLED and under the statute, and we'll send you back a letter. Here's what we believe that you can get erased off of your record. So if anybody ever runs a rap sheet on you, it won't show up. Now see, when I applied for law school, or when I applied to take the bar in South Carolina, they said, have you ever had any criminal convictions, including pretrial intervention that happened to be expunged? Well, I didn't even know what that meant, and I just finished 3 years of law school. I didn't know what pretrial intervention was. That's where first-time offenders, you get, you do community service, or you pay a fine. You can have a limited restitution, and you pay it back. It's just automatically dismissed once you've done it. And there's a lot of different categories that can get expunged. Now, each category, it's a once in a lifetime, and you'll see on the application it says repeatedly, this is one time, this is one time. Possession of marijuana, get that expunged, okay? Other things, if there's a domestic violence, if there's 5 years, and it's the lowest level, no crimes for 5 years, you can get that expunged. You gotta pay the fee. Pretrial intervention, you have to pay the fee. But again, anything that's dismissed, it's all free. So why have it there? Why have something that can hurt you? I'm sort of concerned. I had a student once. This lady's the chair at criminal justice, Dr. Hopman, and she hired me a few years ago. I love working for her. I teach trial practice. And one of my students Googled me. And they said, is it true that you've been convicted of armed robbery? I said, you need to look at the date. Anthony Liebert, I'm a little too old to be 18 back in 1999. That was my nephew, who's named after me. But it's there. See, there's an Anthony Liebert that's been convicted of armed robbery. But it's affected him. At 30 years old, he was delivering pizzas. But more importantly, it killed my grandfather. So we understand that. See, I wish everybody would listen to what my mama said. So I figured I wanted to quit after my second day of college. She said, give it a week. And then there was no pressure on me. And then when I got the bar results for South Carolina, you could call November 1st. We took it in July. And my grandmother used to say, darling, no matter what, we love you. We love you. I said, you don't think I passed that bar exam, do you? No matter what, we love you. I drove 45 minutes to the mall in Columbia to see, and I called from a payphone. That was 1987. I was number 260. And you wait, and you wait, and you wait. And the lady said, congratulations. I drove home and told everybody. And 2 hours later, my brother, who convinced me, well, they probably, when they looked across, they probably got the wrong number. I called again. And then the lady said, congratulations. I said, she says, you don't sound very excited. And I didn't have the nerve to say, this was my confirmatory test to see if I had a test again. So if you have some dismissals or if you have something, I'm going to be in the back and get the applications. And it is pretty confusing, I'll tell you. I've studied it. But the lady that runs it at PTI, and her office is across the street from us, from the courthouse on Library. It's 180 Library Street. Well, they're moving the end of the month. See, our courthouse is coming down, and we're going to build another one. But apparently they're going to build the new one in the parking lot. So we're going to have a logistical nightmare, but when we get it, it's going to be real nice. But right now, so we're across the street, and it's 596-2630. All right, thank you all very much. And again, we'll be in the back with that.
Is it on? Yeah. Hi, I'm Samantha Hopman. I teach criminal justice at USC Upstate. I wanted to just mention I did actually, prior to teaching, I was an employee at the South Carolina Department of Corrections. I worked in inmate programming, so I'm quite well aware of how things go there. One positive thing, just to say something good today about prison reform, is that the South Carolina has done quite well in reducing the number of offenders that are in prison. When I was there, we were 27,000 incarcerated with 7,000 employees, and now we're down to 19 and some, and about 6,000 employees. So it really has made, we have made some inroads there, which is a positive note for today. Okay. In the interest of time, I'm not sure how we're going to do this today, but I just wanted to mention a couple of things as far as my position on some of these issues are, especially having worked in the system prior to teaching. I am an advocate for police-community relations. I know we have a system that needs some work, but I think it also is going to take every single one of us to do our part in that capacity. I've dedicated my professional life to working in teaching young people that are coming into the system after people like me leave it, and also for the new generation that's coming out to make these decisions and make these things work a little bit better than we have. It's not an easy game, for sure. That's why I left, but I thought I could do more good on this side, teaching other people and maybe passing on some of my experiences to them. So I just hope that we can make more of an effort as a group, as a community, to work with our police departments rather than working against them. They are part of the community. I know that sometimes we see it as an us and them, but really if we take that time to get to know why the decisions are made that are made outside of our purview, we don't always understand why the decisions are made, and if we did understand better, I think things would be a little bit different. So ask questions, have forums like this where we can discuss these issues and address these problems head on. I think as a group is much more important and would probably be much better for us. If you're going to point fingers and say they and those and them, become one of the people that fixes the problem, not just pointing fingers at it. So that's why I think our students that are at USC Upstate now, I think it's a great bunch. They leave our school with a great dose of humility, an excellent degree, and I do think that they understand they're coming out to do good in their communities, and they're going to stay here and be part of their communities as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for our panelists? Yes. You will take the mic there.
Hi, I'm Alan. A lot of times when I hear about organizations dealing with problems, you end up in this vicious cycle. Well, we can fix this if we fix this, if we fix this, if we fix this. From y'all's perspectives, when we talk about reform, what's the first thing we have to fix?
As I said, I think that it's sort of the open discussion. It's sort of a group think. We have to work together. We don't do a very good job of that. I think we build a wall. We think it's not our issue. We can't do anything, but we can. And I think for me, that's really what we need to do. When I send students out into the world, I want them to be personable, open to talking to everybody. You can ask any cop. If you see a cop, ask them a question. They're happy to talk to you, but people are afraid to go up to them. They really shouldn't be, because they are, in fact, as I said, part of the community. So I think working together is the most important thing.
If I understand your question correctly, what is the first thing we should do? I think when you talk about criminal justice reform, you talk about two things. I think you talk about the arrest rate, right, and how persons are processed criminally. And then I think on the other side of it, you talk about the actual correctional facilities and how persons are treated there and how they re-enter into society. I hate to say that everything comes back to money, but a lot of it comes back to allocation funds and money. I think that we've taken a stance as a nation, I think in decades past as well as now, of being quote unquote tough on crime, but I don't necessarily know if that was the right answer. So the first thing I think is just a mindset change. One of the things that I talk about, I am a chaplain for a police department. My desire in doing so was to be able to see it from both sides. I have a family member who has been incarcerated and kind of been in and out of that revolving door. I'm a pastor as well. I give you all that background to say I think very similar to we must work together. I think we must put ourselves in the shoes of others. You know, we can be really, really tough on crime until it's our family member. You know, I think the assistant solicitor told a story about his grandfather. I believe you said it literally took him to his grave when it was his family member. I think when we have that type of care and compassion when it comes to both how we process persons who have committed crimes as well as how we treat those who have been incarcerated, I think that mindset change of it being our own helps us not only as my fellow panelist, Dr. Samantha said, that we don't just point a finger, but we start working towards solutions to this complex thing. So a mindset change. I had to get coached up a little bit. Well, one of the things that we want to talk about was some of the steps as things that we can do. And I'm really looking at it in that twofold way that I described earlier. I know that there has been some legislation that would look at eliminating some mandatory minimum sentences. Because we have mandatory minimum sentences, we have people staying in jail really for extended periods of time when maybe due to maybe their past history or being, you know, the nature of the offense. We really should be trying to, I think, give judges more discretion because that's why we consider them to be judges. I think, once again, always more training when it comes to our officers and their engagements and, you know, allowing them to deal with things at their discretion. One of the issues I know that is something that we're addressing in Richland County is also mental health. Because when you look at a lot of times persons who are incarcerated, you see two patterns, I think, present themselves. Persons who have emotional or mental health issues, as well as individuals who come from poverty, sometimes even generational poverty. I know I was supposed to address, one of the things I know that is in the last 6 years, we have increased in the legislature the amount of money that we pay to individuals. I think we've reached near the highest in the Southeast. We have an average starting salary of about a little over $34,000, but spent $58 million since 2014. But really, I think we still see a large and rampant turnover rate for our employees. Even though we have one of the highest rates in the Southeast, there still are a lot of people leaving out, and that's just environmentally, it's unsafe. And to the story that I referenced earlier, I think a lot of people are just getting frustrated. It's funny because I sat on the education committee and I did a lot of education hearings, and I hear some of the same things, that it is the environment, it is the pay, or we're losing a lot of people, there's a lot of turnover, and we really need to recruit more to that field. But really, I think when we talk about, and let me say this, I think it was a point that you mentioned earlier, that there have been several hundreds of persons reduced in the number of inmates that we do have now, and I think that is the key. Because it's kind of, I don't want to keep referencing education, but one of the pushes that we made for education is lower student-to-teacher ratios. So if there are less students with the teachers can do a more effective job in managing the classroom. Well, very similarly, if you have fewer inmates, fewer persons that are being incarcerated for longer periods of time, the ratio to correctional officers to inmates allows them to do a much more effective job.
One more thing to mention. When I was at the Department of Corrections, I was in education near the end of my time there, and we did actually have a reduction in force, which reduced the number of prison schools. As Palmetto Unified School District is actually the district within the prison, from not almost every institution, but a lot of institutions, most of them, to down to about 7 schools. So the reduction was due to funding. So obviously, the first thing that goes generally is any kind of programming, and that's not seen as an important or imperative or required kind of programming, and I think that's a bit misguided. I'm not trying to knock the Department of Corrections that I used to work for, but I really think it was something they should have thought about a little bit more, but again, it's funding. But I do want to mention also there's some work around even locally here in Spartanburg. I volunteer my time with District 7 over at the Spartanburg County Detention Center to tutor inmates in pre-GED math and English. So as much as they are very short term in jail, you can still do something. A lot of them are very close to where they can get their GEDs, so it just makes sense to do things like that. It doesn't cost a cent. I bring my students along sometimes if I can get them to volunteer their time, which is not easy to do with 20-year-olds these days. But they do come and they do help out. But we've made some really good progress there, and I think if you look at the inmates that get their GEDs, they don't always come back, so that does say something. And these are the ones that have come back several times. But when they can actually get out there and finally get a job because they have something that says they've finished something, then they can be better on their own. So that's something to work towards.
Okay, we have time to take one more question. Is there someone that, please come forward.
I'm going to use my neighbor voice. I was just curious, are they a part of... that you hear of? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I just want to just reiterate what all of our panelists have said today. I am the co-chair of the Criminal Justice Committee for the Legislative Black Caucus, and so there are a number of us that have sponsored and co-sponsored bills for criminal justice reform here in South Carolina. And one of particular note that we are fighting for is to make sure that prisoners who are in jail and who have finished their sentences and their probation are made aware that they can vote again. And so we ask for, just your support as we continue to fight and to fight for what's important in South Carolina. So thank you to our panelists for coming and being a part of this. And at this time, Assistant Solicitor Liebert will be going to the back of the church and will be meeting with those who'd like to meet with him about the expungement process, and we'll be able to further answer your questions at that point. All right, next we're going to have our second panel. Okay, as you know, we have a very big education bill which impacts our children here in South Carolina as well as our teachers and staff. And so at this time, we're going to start that education panel. And on the panel, we have Ms. Sherry East, who is the South Carolina Education Association president. We have Dr. Russell Booker, who is the superintendent for Spartanburg School District 7. And we have Ms. Glenda Morrison-Fair from Greenville. She represents Greenville County Area 23 as a school board member. If you would start, please, Ms. East.
Hello. Yes. Thank you. Good evening, and thank you to those of you who have stayed around to hear about something as important as education. I am a high school science teacher. I have been teaching 27 years in South Carolina. I am from Rock Hill, and I am currently the South Carolina Education Association president. I took over that job in July, and the first thing they asked me to talk about was what was the most important issue or the most important thing facing education in South Carolina right now, and I believe that would be the teacher shortage. We are having a huge crisis, and many people aren't aware of that, but 5,300 teachers left the profession last year, and that wasn't due to retirement. They left because they walked out of teaching. They are gone. We have colleges producing 1,400 teachers. There are not young folks that want to be teachers right now, so they're not going into the field of education. So that, in August, resulted in 621 vacancies in this state. And that equates to about 12,000 students that did not have a teacher in August. Now, you probably may not have known that because, you, like Dr. Booker, you don't have the kids just sitting there without a teacher, so they went somewhere. So they got absorbed into somebody else's class. You hired a long-term sub, you rearranged schedules, or you may not have been able to offer a course because you couldn't find a teacher for that class. So I think because of the neglect this year for the pay and working conditions, I only foresee that problem getting worse in August. You can look at the job vacancies right now. There are lots of them posted. And I've heard from many as superintendents that it's the most alarming thing is they've had teachers leave mid-year. Like they just are done. And so they've left. They've taken jobs out of the profession field. And when I traveled the state asking, you know, what's going on? Why are you leaving the profession? I'm a high school science. I taught in a great school district, but things have changed to the level of accountability and paperwork and class size has really grown. But the number one thing I heard teachers talk about was their working conditions. I was unaware that elementary teachers go without a break during the day. They teach from 7 to 3, and if they're going to go to the restroom, they're supposed to text the office, and someone's supposed to come and relieve them. And these are in wealthy districts that I heard that story. It's commonly called their no-break day. And I was like, what? As a high school teacher, I get that planning time. I get to go to the bathroom. I get to have lunch without my students. So as I started hearing these stories, we contacted legislators and said, you know, can you fix this? Oh, Sherry, that's illegal. You can't have people without a break. I was like, it's not illegal. We're salaried employees. So we are trying to fix that, but it's a little frustrating with the cost factor. Everything has a price attached to it. It shouldn't cost you anything to do what's right. Going to the bathroom shouldn't be a cost factor. So the other thing we hear is class size, which was referenced by one of the representatives, and that would be the number one immediate thing you could do to help a teacher is lower their class size. Well, I'm not even sure at this point, Dr. Booker could talk about it, if you voted to reduce class size, I don't know if you could find the personnel to do it, even if you could find the teachers. The other thing was the disrespect for time. That's my number one soapbox, is teachers are being kept after school till 5 and 6 o'clock at night. They're being asked to work athletic gates on their own time. They're being asked to bake cupcakes at home as a professional requirement, as part of their job, which just shouldn't happen. The testing, everything's about a test. I had a teacher say he was going to leave. His child was nothing more than a dot on a data point, and that's not why he went into teaching. We've had several teachers call that have had mental breakdowns in the middle and have checked into somewhere and left the teaching profession. So the pay and the working conditions are why we have this shortage right now. And then I think the third part of this is what can you do about it, and what have we seen happen in their state is I think we've seen a giant Red for Ed movement across the nation. Teachers have finally, the ones that haven't left, have said, let me stand up and make things better. And how do I do that? How do I use my voice and not get in trouble? Because there's a culture of fear out there that we're not allowed to speak up. We're not allowed to tell you we can't go to the restroom. We're not allowed to tell you our classes are too big or a child pinched me or, So we have suffered in silence for too long. And now it's time to use our teacher voice and get out there and make change. We had a good opportunity with the Ed Reform Bill. We got some things in there we wanted. Some things are still not where we want them to be, but it's a start. And I think finally, after this legislative session that I've been baptized into, opened my eyes to a lot of things. And South Carolina teachers don't really care for politics. It's not in our wheelhouse, but we're going to have to because politics is personal. It affects your job. And if we can't get them to introduce legislation and vote it in, then we have to vote for the change that we need. And if after this session we look at who voted with us and against us, then we definitely need to do a better job of finding folks to run for those offices, supporting the candidates that support public education, be it Democrats or Republicans, and you vote in the change that you need to see, or you're going to continue to harm children in South Carolina. Because until we get it right, we're all going to suffer. Our children are the future. Education's the future. Educate, not incarcerate. And I think united, we have to have one voice. So united, we can have better pay. United, we can lower our class size. United, we can have less testing. United, we can deal with the behaviors. And united, we can get better pay and working conditions and improve our schools for children and teachers in South Carolina.
So this is my home church, so I can say, can we get an amen? My name is Russell Booker. I have the privilege of serving as the school superintendent here in Spartanburg District 7, which primarily serves the city of Spartanburg. I want to thank representatives for hosting this important meeting, but I also want to thank you for making education a priority. It's such an important topic right now. Sherry, talking about a teacher voice, that's so true. Our teachers have stood up this year. They have been to Columbia. The legislators are listening to them. They've created a Facebook page with over 20,000 teachers who are voicing their concerns. So I want to ask all of you to join them as they continue to ask our legislators to make education a priority. Those are the voices they're going to listen to. I am pleased to say, however, our legislators have made education a priority this year. I think for the first time since Dick Riley, our U.S. Secretary of Education and former governor, I've never seen us working on education reform to this level. So just a couple of things I want to mention to you before we open the floor up for questions after Glenda speaks with you. It's important for you to know that right now in Columbia, there is a major education reform bill that is being debated. That bill is H3759. You don't have to remember that number. You can just go online. You can Google South Carolina education reform, and you can find that bill there. It is already passed in the House. It passed on March 6th, 113-4. So there was a lot of support in the House for that bill. That bill is now in the Senate. It's still being deliberated. We're getting close to that May 9th ending, so I'm hoping we can, get some things done during this session. But it's important that you pay attention to what's going on with that reform bill because it will impact you as community members, as parents, as educators, and the like. Very quickly, people often ask me, so Russell, what do you think about the reform bill? And it's hard to say, what you think about it because it's so comprehensive. The bill's 84 pages. There are 59 sections to the bill, and it's written in 8 different parts. But I just want to tell you a few of the things that are represented in this bill right now. So the first part of this bill deals with college and career readiness, which is something that's very important, of course. There's a part of this bill that focuses on student empowerment, really taking a look at what the students' rights are in this state. There's a section of this bill where the governor is looking at creating an office within the governor's office. It's called the 0 to 20 committee. You need to know about that. The largest part of the bill is Section 4, and it deals with workforce preparation. So as Senator Sanders talked about early learning and reading and college access, that portion of the bill addresses many of those points. There's a section of the bill that deals with teacher satisfaction and really trying to elevate the teaching profession. Important for you to see that. The last couple of sections deal with help for our underperforming schools, especially in some of our poor regions in the state, some of our rural areas within the state. And then there's a provision that talks about local school board accountability. So I just want you to be aware of what's going on with that. Take a look so you can be informed. I'm going to nix a couple of the things I was going to talk about because Senator Sanders really underscored them. I was going to sit up here and talk about the importance of early education. And really, if there's an area where we need to invest, that is it. He shared that. I want you to know that is exactly right. We've got to have a greater focus. And I'm not talking about 4K. I'm talking about beginning at birth. And that's something that we as a community are going to have to rally around. I was going to talk about the teacher crisis. So Sherry has talked about that. I do want to say we are in a crisis state right now with our teachers. I had the privilege of attending a trip to Finland back in October. A group of delegates from South Carolina had the opportunity to go. And if you don't know much about Finland, what I want you to understand is they have the #1 educational system in the world when it comes to student achievement. The other thing I want you to know about Finland is their teachers are held in high esteem in Finland. And I've always wanted to go to see why that was the case, because people always say, their teachers are treated just like doctors and their teachers are paid just like doctors. So I wanted to go and see. Well, it was true. Their teachers are held in esteem just like our physicians. And they don't make what they make, that's a myth. But they are held in high esteem. This is what's happened in Finland, and that can happen here. Over the last 40 years, they've really gone through a comprehensive reform. So in Finland, instead of having a system that is based on competition, they've created a system that's really based on collaboration. Instead of a system that we've created that's based on standardization, they have created a system that really focuses on the child. Instead of a system that is test-based accountability, they have truly created a system that is based on trust. It's trust-based responsibility is what they call it. Their teachers have such a level of trust and autonomy where they can go into that classroom and they can do their work, and we trust them to do that work as professionals. We deprofessionalize the profession here in America. And they've built a system that when they talk about equity for all, they mean equity for everybody. They believe that education is a basic human right. So what's happened in Finland, they've done away with standardized testing. They've done away with teacher inspections. And they said, we're going to trust our teachers. So what has happened as a result of that is this. The teachers don't leave the profession. We were talking to teachers who were in their 60s, their mid-60s, and they don't leave. So what does that do? Well, if you want to teach in Finland, they'll have 300 people applying for their teacher ed programs. But because they don't have those vacancies, because everybody's staying, they only take the top 10%. So to become a teacher in Finland is a big deal, which means, guess what? That is now elevated. You're a teacher? Wow. So those teachers are rock stars now. But it's because they did away with so many of those things that we're piling on. So that's something we can do here in this country. That's something we can do here in these states. And I hope we'll focus on doing those things. And then the last thing I want to mention is this. And this is something Senator Sanders said. He said we've got to get to the point to where we're honoring our teachers, and we're honoring this profession. And we've moved away from that. I was in a meeting in Columbia with a group of superintendents not too long ago. One of our elected officials, wasn't anybody in the House or the Senate, they were speaking to us, and I stood up and I raised the question. I said, here in South Carolina, we have a constitutional requirement that says we're to provide a minimally adequate education. All right? Now, that's not written in the Constitution, but when the state Supreme Court looked at the lawsuit that was filed, their ruling was you're providing what the Constitution requires as a minimally adequate education. So they essentially threw the lawsuit out. We've got to create a system that doesn't focus on being minimally adequate, but it focuses on equitable outcomes for every child in this state. So I said to this legislator, we're better than that. And not to get political about the flag, but when we took that flag down in South Carolina, that's not going to do away with racism, but it does tell the rest of the world we're better than that. And I believe that if we as a state can come together and say that we don't want an educational system where the floor is minimally adequate. We want the floor to be that every child deserves an equitable education. We're not going to fix education by changing that, but it's going to tell everybody in this state that we are better than that. So that's something I hope that we can continue to push so that we can really honor this profession the way it needs to be honored.
Thank you very much. My name is Glenda Morrison Fair, and I represent District 23 on Greenville County School Board. A poem comes to mind. Humpty Dumpty. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men could not put Humpty together again. Ladies and gentlemen, today we face a broken system. When I was asked to speak on this panel, I thought it was such an interesting combination, education and criminal reform. Make no mistake, education is the foundation. It is the equalizer. Our only choice is either education or the criminal justice system. Tonight I would like to speak to you, and I will not be long because I want to hear what you have to say, how you can make my job better, how I can be a better representative. My background, I come from industry. I was in industry for 20 years, actually, in software, writing computer programs. And I woke up one morning and I said, there has to be a better way. Income was good, but I was not satisfied because I looked around, and at that time I was pretty young, and no one was coming into the profession as young as I was, or even that looked like me. And I thought, what can I do to make a difference? So I decided to go into education. And I believe since we're in church, God said, I waited for you 19 years and you finally figured it out. You needed to make a difference. I come from a family of educators who dedicated their lives to making life better for young people and allowing them to go to the next level. I did not want to go in that into that profession exactly because of what Senator Sanders said. I did not see teachers honored. I did not see the pay overwhelming. I saw long nights, checking papers, making ends meet, and barely from making ends meet from day to day. But I also saw two people who happened to be my mother and father. At the end of the day, they felt they made a difference, and that's what I sought. Everybody on the panel, and even the panel before us, has made excellent points. I want you to know that you have the keys in your hand. I heard the word unity. You have the key to unity in your hand. Even though you elect your officials, you need to hold them accountable. You need to make sure that what's near and dear to you and what's near and dear to me are your most prized possessions, and that is your children. You can't get anything more dear than your children. So what can we do to make it better? We can support our teachers. I agree that they need to be honored, they need to be paid, and they certainly need to be respected. What can we do? We need to show up every day at even minor events, not just sporting events, but just minor events. When a child comes home and says, look what I did, look what I said, look how I'm doing in school. A child takes its clue from his home environment. And yes, our environments, just like Humpty Dumpty, are broken. But I believe that we have hope. And in 2019, I believe environments can be fixed again. If we can go to the moon and back, we can do anything that we want to do. Even in Spartanburg, even in Greenville, even in South Carolina. My hope and dream is that South Carolina rises from the bottom of the barrel and stands as a beacon of light for education to the nation. They always say, well, South Carolina is almost on the bottom, and thank God for Mississippi. But when I hear them say that, I think, but I'm here, and I'm willing to take the challenge to make sure that each and every day, when a child wakes up, a child has hope. A young lady, a young girl told me one time, and I'm going to end with this. And she said to me, you know, no kid wakes up, and I think Senator Sanders or someone said, no kid wakes up and says every morning when they get out of bed, I'm going to be a loser. I'm just not going to do anything today. They get up with hope and inspiration. Just think about it. Every single kid, every kid that you may see on the street and you think, wow, what did not that kid do? But the kid wakes up with hope and ambition. And this young lady said, but it's something between putting your foot on the floor and getting to the school every morning and walking in the school, and something happens. Your hope goes away. And I had to take a second look. And at that time, I was a teacher, and I thought, wow, that's a powerful statement. What can we do so that when that child puts their foot on the floor and goes from home or whatever environment to school, that school is hope for that individual? Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to join us in that fight. Each and every day, our children need you, they depend on you, and you are the only model that they have to look to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Before I take some questions from the audience, I want to just give you a little bit of information about what the Legislative Black Caucus has been doing in the education arena. Although we don't have a huge contingency, we have about 44 members in the legislature who are part of the Legislative Black Caucus, we still are doing things to make an impact. And that can be seen in when we passed the budget a few weeks ago. We fought for some things to go in the budget for schools. One of those was to make sure that teachers had breaks. And that was led by Representative Jerry Govan, who is still here, I believe. But he's the chair of our caucus. And there were many of us who stood up and advocated for those breaks. And the first vote was, it was turned down. And then as we began to talk, and I think a few of the legislators began to be persuaded that perhaps they needed to do that. So that was passed in the budget, and so as I said, the Black Caucus fought very hard for that, and so we're so happy that we were able to achieve that in the budget. Another thing is that one of the things we fought for was teacher exemptions for taxes for those teachers who move to an area where the school systems are, for lack of a better term, in trouble. And I'm sure that our educators here can explain to you what those areas are, but those are basically areas in which schools are underperforming. And so in order to entice teachers to move there, we were able to put into the budget that teachers get a 5-year tax exemption if they live in that, if they move to that particular area and teach. One of the other things that we were able to pass was to have the legislature make sure that schools are providing broadband internet access, because so many of our children are falling behind with it because they don't have internet access. And so that is something that we put a provision in terms of a year by which that had to be done. And so that's another way in which we are trying to make sure that children in our public schools are being taken care of, and to make sure that they get a good quality education that they can carry further. So just wanted to give you a few of those things that we've done in the education arena with the Legislative Black Caucus.
And can I mention one other thing? So I also failed to mention, again, I want to thank our legislators. So teacher pay does make a difference. And for the first time, you know, should everything pan out, they're doing quite a bit this year. So our first year teachers, the first 4 years, there's almost a 10% pay increase for those teachers. So here in Spartanburg, essentially what that means, you know, a teacher out of college, instead of the $36,000, it's going to be close to $40,000 a year for that first year teacher. So that's something we are very appreciative of. Now the budget hadn't passed, but both the House and the Senate are looking at that. But everybody else across the board, our teachers are looking at about a 4% pay raise this year. So with their step increase, it equates to about 6%. But the goal was, what can we do to really attract teachers during those first few years and keep them, because they leave during those first, 2-3 years. So thank y'all. 20% of them leave. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to lead off the questions before I entertain questions from the audience here, and I'm going to give you a tough one. One of the reasons why we have been dealing and tackling the education reform bill is because of the college readiness of our students here in South Carolina. We were given a very disappointing statistic, many of which brought gasp to us, because we did not realize the gravity of the situation. And that is when it comes to the number of the number of high school graduates that are ready for college when they graduate. We were given a statistic of the 2018 high school graduates in South Carolina. 95% of African American students are not ready for college, and 70% of majority white students are not ready for college. And so that was something that certainly put some fire behind us to see what we could do to make sure that that statistic turns around. And so I'd like to ask the panelists, how can we ensure, or what can we work on to ensure that more of South Carolina students are ready for college when they graduate?
Thank you for that question. It goes all the way back to the K-4, to the pre-school years. Our kids a lot of times start 2 and 3 years behind by the time they hit K-5. And that gap continues to grow all the way up to and through 12th grade. As we know, K-4 is not supported by South Carolina. K-5 is mandatory. The earlier we can introduce education to students, the better. It starts I guess it fosters a love for learning. Learning cannot be forced, but we want learning to be enjoyed, something that a child desires to do. And that momentum can be carried throughout K-4 all the way through 12th grade. So if anything, if I had a wish list, I would wish that you legislators would support K-4 and even maybe K-3.
So the education reform bill addresses this. There was a part of the bill that said initially, if a student graduates from high school and they go to college and they need remediation, basically what's happening right now, the colleges have to pay for those students to be remediated, which essentially means they can come on, but you've got to take some classes to get caught up before we can move you forward. Now, what happens with a lot of our children who may have, a life scholarship or a Hope scholarship, if you don't have the number of hours during that first semester, you lose the scholarship. So that was a concern. So initially the bill said if they're not ready, then the high schools are responsible for remediating them. So that was taken out. So I think what the bill says right now is that if they're not ready when they get to college, then it's on the school district's dime to pay for that remediation. So, we'll see where that goes. This is how readiness is determined. Have any of you ever heard of the SAT? All right. Raise your hand if you've heard of the ACT. Okay, good. Now, if I would have asked that question 5 years ago, not many people would have known. But those are our two college entrance exams. Those exams show us the readiness level of a student. We've set some cut scores in South Carolina to determine what readiness means. Now, I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm from Spartanburg. I've done well. I got a PhD. Don't mean nothing. But when I walked out of high school in 1987, my readiness score wouldn't have been where it's supposed to be today. I wasn't ready, okay? So we've got an issue there. But that issue, again, it starts ensuring that our kids really have what they need. But we also need to get our colleges on the same page in determining what does readiness mean. Because from one college to another, readiness may mean something totally different. So I want to say that first of all. The other thing I want to say is this. We need to start doing more with our students, especially our first generation students who have never really entered college. And there are some things taking place right now. I think about programs in our school district like our early college. We've done a lot in South Carolina with programs like advanced placement, where children can start taking college level classes as early as 9th grade if they're at a certain academic level. We have a number of bright students who might not be in those advanced placement courses. So how can we start getting them access to college as early as 9th grade? And that's what we're trying to do right now. So when is Anderson's graduation? So May, that's the high school. Anderson's also graduating from Spartanburg Community College in a few months. Anderson's a senior at Spartanburg High School. He's in our Viking Early College program. He started that program in 9th grade taking college level classes. He's going to graduate with an associate's degree and a high school diploma. So he's going to be ready. So one of the things I would ask our legislators to continue to do is to provide funding so that we can start, introducing college to our children at an earlier stage as well. North Carolina has that in every county where they pay for dual enrollment courses for their children. So we've got a lot of work to do on the college readiness side, but this is a problem that we've got to address as a community.
Well, this is another one of my soapbox things I get on, because we as teachers get our feelings hurt really bad when you say, you've created work skill deficient children. Whoa, no, I didn't. The system of this report card system that we took on about a few years ago It's had some adverse effects in what I call the do-over society of children that ties the hands of the teachers. And I don't think a lot of parents realize these kind of things are going on. It's called grade inflation. We don't give zeros anymore. Every kid gets a 60 or a 40. And when I challenge this, well, Sherry, an F's an F, does it matter? Well, to me, no. If you don't care, Dr. Booker, if I give a 60 instead of a 0, okay. But guess who does care? The worker, the business owner, because you don't not show up for work, they're not going to give you 40% of your pay, and you're not going to get to take a 40% of a test and take it over 3 times, and you don't get to do FA recovery when you don't show up for work. So we have created, through no fault of anybody, no one meant to do this, I think, but we've created a do-over society of children that have been allowed to take tests 3 times. They've allowed to go to Saturday school to make up attendance. They do credit recovery. They can pay $25 and go take what they've missed in biology, which is more work on a teacher, because we don't ever want a child to fail because it hurts their report card grade. So we got real creative because we want people to buy houses and we want to look good and we want this report card to say a certain thing. So we've got to quit talking out of both sides of our mouth. If you want work skill and college career ready kids, you cannot let them take a test 3 times. You cannot let them come to Saturday school and pay $50. You cannot support behaviors with administrators' behaviors that just, we don't want to show that we've suspended too many kids. We don't want to put them in school. So to me, we've just created all of these policies where the first time a kid fails is on mom and dad's dime or a business owner's problem. So we have got to be able to let a child fail at some point and do a little tough love. When some of the age in here, if you failed, what'd you do? You went to summer school, you took it over. You didn't get to go sit in the computer lab at lunch and redo the parts that you missed. So we've got to look at some of our policies in the trenches of what has created the work skill and college deficiencies. Because to me, from a high school teacher who gets kids on a 4th grade reading level, we've got to do some work on the policies that are out there that have created this problem.
Thank you. All right, this time we'll just take a few more questions and then we'll have to wrap it up. Yes, if you'll come and get the mic over here, if you can. Thank you.
Good evening. I just want to start off by saying that I am the son of a teacher. She has spent her lifelong years of 30 years of service at Miami-Dade County in Miami, and she is serving 2 years, going to be ending her 2 years at District 7 of Spartanburg. She's a diehard teacher. She loves her job, but I was wondering as a question, well, 2-part question. What is it that you can do to encourage Black and brown boys and girls to continue to stay in school? And then how can you also encourage Black and brown men and women to be teachers to these students that are not able to, as you guys are saying, being disprivileged of not being able to go into or be ready for college?
That is a problem, and I think in South Carolina there's only 250 African American male teachers. That should alarm people. Children need to see children that look like them in successful roles. And just one quick program is a program called Call Me Mister that takes African American male students and puts them in a cohort, lots of support into the profession. That would just be one thing we could do that I know of.
So to the first question, what can we do to encourage them to stay in school? I agree a lot with what Sherry said just a moment ago, but at the same time, I do know that we've got to do more with restorative practices in our schools. We've got to do more keeping students in school instead of putting them out. 9 years ago, our expulsion rate, we 114 students, okay? This past year was 1 student, okay? That's not because we're being soft on kids and just keeping them in school, but we are trying to find alternatives for them now. In Spartanburg County, you'll find an initiative called Compassionate Schools, where we're trying to educate teachers to identify problems that our children have. We call them ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences. And when you are working with children in poverty, you'll find that they have a lot of ACEs. They have a lot of those adverse childhood experiences. So what can we do to continue to do that? So we've got, flexible learning programs now. If you don't make it there, we've got virtual programs now. So that's one of the things that I want to mention. And I'd be happy to talk offline about some of the specifics because we need more mentors. So to the encouraging them to go into the profession, I'll just give you an example of one of the things we're trying to do right now. So Call Me Mister. Who's ever heard of Call Me Mister? Call Me Mister was founded out of Clemson University. It's a wonderful program trying to get African-American males or males of color into our classrooms, specifically at the elementary and middle school level. These Call Me Misters, they are in 24 colleges, community colleges, and four-year institutions around the state. Bringing one to USC Upstate. We have Call Me Mister right now at Spartanburg Community College because you can go from community college and then any of those institutions. Going back to our early college program as an example, we are partnering with Call Me Mister. And what we're doing right now in this partnership, and they ran a segment on this on WYFF not too long ago, for any of our juniors at Spartanburg High School who are part of the early college program at the community college, if they want to be a teacher, then Call Me Mister has agreed to allow them to go ahead and matriculate into the Call Me Mister program. By the time they graduate, we will have helped them with their praxis, their NT, whatever you have to take to get that teacher exam out of the way. When they transfer to that four-year institution, what we have guaranteed them, if they're successful in finishing that program, then we're guaranteeing them a job teaching in School District 7. So that's one example. We're having conversations with Converse College now about our females, looking at a program where if you start there in the 11th grade at Converse, they're going to go ahead and work you through their educational foundations courses. You finish that program, we'll guarantee you a job. So just trying to be creative and getting the children in the pipeline early. This is the problem. I've got one child with my males over at that community college in grades 9 through 12 who's interested in going to education right now. Why? Because nobody's saying, man, that's what you ought to do. We've got to change this whole notion of why you want to teach. Why do you want to do that? So that's our challenge right there. So I'm going to ask you as a community with our young people to encourage them to go into teaching. We've got teachers encouraging their students, don't go into teaching. And that's a real problem. I get it, trust me. I'm getting ready to graduate a son from high school this year. If he says, Dad, I want to teach, I'm going to say, hey, let's go for it. Let's do it, Now, you're not going to live a lush life, but there's no honorable profession than being a teacher. He might be a Pastor Snyder one day. He's got that heart too. But
I would like to say that I agree with what the panelists have said, but I still think it goes back to the community and the family. Every child needs somebody as a role model. When I was growing up, if we didn't have it in the family, we had it at church. And now that's not so much. But the community still has role models. When you ask children, very few talk about high school teachers, but most everybody remembers their first grade teacher. That's such a significant age. I go back to the young age. You ask, I believe in role models and people who look like students, but I want to give you an example. In my own family, I had two daughters. One daughter had basically, throughout her whole high school career, had basically all African-American teachers. One daughter had basically all non-African-American teachers, basically white, maybe Hispanic. And that daughter had no problems in school. But the daughter who had African-American teachers had problems in school. But she was blessed to have an African-American teacher who introduced her to a great teacher who was a debate coach. And she took off like a rocket. That turned her whole educational career around. So my solution is great passionate teachers, great passionate role models, regardless of what color they come in. Because a great teacher can inspire a kid to be whatever that kid wants to be. You know what's funny? When I talk to young kids, they don't look at color. They look at hair color, eye color, what color clothes the teacher had. Just someday ask a kid, what was your teacher like, especially on the first day of school? Tell me what your teacher looked like. And they will never say color. They will say they had orange hair or they had yellow hair. And so you can learn a lot from young people. Even as Dr. Booker said, in Greenville County, we have all types of alternative programs. Dual credit, AP, we are constantly pushing the envelope to give children choices. But it's the compassionate teacher that pushes that kid to be all that they can be.
Let me mention USC Upstate. I've talked about Call Me Mister. So Samantha, make sure you tell them. USC Upstate also has a program called Real Men Are Teachers. And it's a wonderful program. You can't see this picture, but this was dinner last night. I took the 8 of them out. We went to the Piedmont Club. We had dinner. We did some etiquette. I go out with them twice a year. And we just sat around and talked. And if you could see these young men, you will see what these professionals really can be. So see their pictures, encourage them, help them to stay with it, and we want them to teach in Spartanburg.
Thank you. We'll have time for just one other question. So, all right.
I will get to the microphone first. Thank you so much for your perspectives and your stories and helping to expand our perspectives more on this important issue. As Dr. Booker was saying, with the learning from Finland and these countries that have the exceptional rates of happy people, and not only happy students and teachers, I've been learning more about Scandinavian theory of education lately as well, and one of their theories is for those early students, the preschool and kindergarten students, how important play and especially outdoor activity is, not only for the ways their brain develop, but as well as their eyesight, as well as their creative thinking and their collaboration, and how they care for the environment in the future as well. And as we are coming to those important issues, I'm wondering, one, if there's any way that you could tell us how we can advocate for more play and more outdoor activity in our systems, and how we can continue to learn from these systems, how we are learning from these systems, and how we're putting those into our own systems here in South Carolina as well. Thank you.
Great question. All right, so I'll take this one. So in Finland, all right, let me tell you. First of all, we don't start teaching reading in Finland until they're 7. They don't think it's age appropriate. That doesn't mean the kids aren't learning. But between birth and age 6, those children are playing. And they're developing socially, emotionally, physically, intellectually. And guess what? By the age of 7, they are ready to read. You go into a Finland school and you'll see a teacher teaching for 45 minutes. Bell rings. Kids will run to the cubicles, put their hats on, put their shoes on. They go outside and play for 15 minutes. Come back in, teacher teaches for 45 minutes. That bell rings, same thing. And they're running. Go outside and they play. So they get about 4 breaks during the day, not counting lunch, just to go outside and play and run around, because you learn doing those things. So the other thing I'll mention, in Finland, I always heard they don't believe in homework. Well, they don't believe in homework. So in those elementary schools and middle schools in particular, they don't believe in bogging the children down with those things. So what can we do? Those are things that can be replicated. I'm a little upset. One of my colleagues, Danny Merck from Pickens, superintendent, also went to Finland. And one of the things they've implemented in his school district, he's piloting this in 3 schools right now. They're called Finnish Fridays. So on those Fridays, what they do, the teachers teach for 45 minutes, children go play, come back in. Now, he's not doing it every day, because why? He's afraid, if I do this every day, my test scores are going to go down. Now, guess what's happened, though? The teachers love it, The children love it, the families love it, discipline's gone down. You know, the children who are diagnosed with ADHD, you know, they're doing so much better. So some of those things can be replicated, but you are exactly right. When I talked about Finland and these other countries focusing on the individual, they're focusing on the children. We focus on standards. And until we change that, you know, we're going to continue to go down this path that we've been going down. But there are some things we can learn. So I'm hoping to institute more recess in District 7 next year.
And I just want to add that in Greenville County, we just changed our homework policy. One of the things is that teachers give just tons of homework. If you have a kid, especially on the high school level, that kid has 7 courses, that's an all night long situation. It causes more trouble for the teachers, it's more work for the teachers, and surprisingly, we got a lot of people that said, oh no, we want to give homework. So our policy says that if you give homework, you need to grade homework. Because a lot of time, homework is busy work. So homework definitely should have a purpose. And that's what our policy speaks to in Greenville County.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank our panelists so much for taking the time. And that is not only on our education panel, but also our criminal justice reform panel. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have learned as much as we learned tonight. And so I want to thank you so much. If you see any of the panelists here, you want to talk with them afterwards or get some information, please feel free to do that. I also want to thank Dr. Snoddy for his vision and his leadership for allowing us to be here tonight and host this program. I want to thank former Representative Brenda Lee Price, who has been very valuable to me in helping me to put on this program and who provided a lot of support in terms of volunteers and just making sure that we had everything we needed for this town hall meeting tonight. So I want to thank her as well. I want to thank our representatives for coming. And I know Representative Thigpen, he's pretty familiar, pretty comfortable here in the pulpit in that he has a church in Columbia. And also Representative Alexander is also a minister who has a church in Florence, and I believe he's gone. But I just wanted to kind of rib them for just a second and say, I know you're very comfortable here in the pulpit. But also to thank all of the representatives who took time out to come up here and be with us today. They came from Charleston, Columbia, Florence, other areas, just to be here with us today, and I want to say thank you to them. I also want to thank Chair of the Black Caucus, Representative Jerry Govan, for his leadership. I pitched this idea to him back in the summertime, and he said, go for it. And so we definitely have done that. This is the first town hall that the Legislative Black Caucus will have. This is the Upstate Legislative Black Caucus Town Hall. We will have one in the Midlands, and we will also have one in the Lower Country. So with that, I want to bring up Representative Govan, who wants to have a few closing remarks, and then we will close out with the benediction from Reverend Snoddy.
Let's give our panelists another round of applause. I'm going to make my comments very brief, and really it's an appeal. And we're going to ask, as I do this, for Reverend Snoddy to make it up. Oh, well, he's already up. Outstanding. I tell you what. Ladies and gentlemen, again, you know, the Legislative Black Caucus is a 501c4, so I don't want anybody to walk out here to think that we are doing anything in violation of our mandate. But this organization is about people and ensuring that South Carolinians have access to information so we can make the right choices, because this government is the government of the people. And so we feel very privileged that we have had the honor to serve in terms of the members of the caucus, 44 strong, and we intend to have this type of event around the state, as Representative Rosalind Myers has stated. But there's something that you can do. If you've been inspired about what you've heard tonight, and hopefully we will have other partners, and I wanted to say this while he was here, but Senator Sanders was one of the first individuals, even prior to being a presidential candidate, to indicate his desire based on what he heard about us after visiting the caucus, that indicated that he wanted to become a partner. And so we extended him that opportunity, and as a partner, that's why he was here tonight. We'd like to also extend that opportunity to other candidates, but we also would like to extend that opportunity to you. So if you're interested, please be sure that you have signed in on the sign-in sheets, because we will be communicating with you and indicating to you or sending you or forwarding you information on how you can become involved with the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus. And again, thank you so much on behalf of the 44 members of the caucus. Again, there's no I in team. We have the best, the strongest, and the most involved caucus in these United States of America. I'd also like to personally thank, while I have the podium, Reverend Snoddy, a longtime friend, and the Mount Moriah family for what they've done, former Representative Lee, want to get my credentials into. And I'd like to call this young lady back to the podium for the fine job that she's done. To all of our panelists, Sherry, you did a great job tonight. I want y'all to know that the SCA has been actively engaged and involved in this education reform movement, along with other agency entities, but SCA has really been involved, and I want to thank them for their support of the Legislative Black Caucus, because they are also a member of our corporate roundtable, and I want to recognize them for that, and thank you so much, Sheriff. We appreciate that. So having said that, there's one other individual that I would like to thank, and I know he's not looking for this, but Devin, come up here, young man. I know you got your hands full. Devin Owens is our executive director. And we appreciate the fine job he's done in terms of working with the Upstate Coalition of Legislators to make this happen. Thank you all so much in terms of what you do. Again, we want to reach out and partner with you to make this a better South Carolina for all of us. And having said that, Reverend Snoddy, would you do us the honor, sir? Bob, give her a round of applause again.
Please stand for the benediction. May the Lord be with you as you depart from this place. May He ignite your hearts